Okay, good morning everyone and welcome to Cabinet this morning in this nice cool room. For once we're coping with the hot weather. A few bits, just making sure we were quorate because we have a few apologies this morning, but I understand that is correct, so we're okay there. So thank you all for attending this meeting of Cabinet. While this meeting is open to the public, it is being recorded and broadcast live on the County Council's website and will be available for repeat viewing. It may also be recorded and filmed by the press and public. Filming or recording is only permitted in this room whilst the meeting is taking place and must stop when the meeting is either adjourned or closed. Filming is not permitted elsewhere in the building at any time. Also, we're not expecting a fire drill, but in the event there is a fire alarm, please vacate via the main reception or via one of the emergency exits across the hall. Thank you. So, apologies for absence.
Thank you, Leader. We've got apologies from Councillors Forster, Fairhurst and Adams-King.
Okay, thank you. Declarations of interest. Councillor Heron.
Chairman, thank you. I have a personal interest in respect of item 12 on today's agenda, which is the local enterprise partnerships integration. I am a member of the Solent board. It is a personal and non-pecuniary interest, so I will remain and vote on the item.
Okay, thank you. Any further declaration of interest? Councillor Chad.
Thank you. I am a member of the Enterprise M3 board as well.
Yeah. Okay, thank you very much. No further, thank you. Minutes of the previous meeting. Just looking around, can I take it that we can accept the meetings as set out and approve those? Okay, thank you very much. Okay, Chairman's announcements. Just a few announcements to make. We're all aware of the national political situation. And it's uncertain for the next couple of months, or the situation is. So we're monitoring all the events closely and preparing to engage with ministers and through many of the topics we are discussing today when there is greater clarity on the national picture. I'm also pleased to report that Hampshire County Council has won a PACER Awards. This is for the best annual report on local parking and traffic management information. So this is quite a big event actually. It's a national award contested by council throughout England. So many congratulations to the officers in the parking services team within the Highways Group who produced an excellent winning report. And if you know, we reported several successful awards that we had when I reported at full council. So just making that point again, despite being through COVID and all the pressures we've had and all the work, Hampshire is still doing very well nationally. I'd also like to wish good luck to Hampshire's adult health team and care team as they've been shortlisted for 3 local government chronicle awards. The winners will be announced at the ceremony taking place tomorrow, being shortlisted for 3 prestigious and highly competitive national awards is a great achievement and a tribute to the fantastic work that our adult services team is doing to support older and vulnerable residents in Hampshire, and just sort of confirming the point that I made just prior to that. So Hampshire is holding its own and doing very well nationally. I'd also just like to make sort of a bit of a special announcement in terms of somebody that has been doing a lot of work for us over many years. I got involved with the LEADER funding many years ago, and this is really, I suppose to say about Emily Roberts, who was, most of us would have known as Emily Preston. So in terms of the LEADER programme, I think many of you will know this was a funded programme to support the economy, communities and environmental improvements in rural areas. And I actually started that at the very beginning with my time in Winchester when we looked at several groups throughout the county. This goes back to 2015. So as programme manager, Emily secured close to £3.5 million of grant funding for the Loddon and Test area, leveraging over 20 million of private investment. The programme has supported many businesses to diversify, expand and create new jobs as well as secure new and improved community facilities. The Laudanum Test programme has been one of the most successful in England by funding allocated, invested, matched and impact on the ground. So this is a national scheme, yet again, where through Emily's good work that we've been sort of recognised in terms of that, about the excellent work that is done and the investment secured. So the result achieved thus far, and there will be positive ongoing legacy beyond the programme's lifetime, is due entirely to Emily's outstanding effort to secure the maximum benefit for local businesses and communities with the support from the local action group. Emily's performance and high regard in which she is held by all partners, the businesses she supports and the Rural Payments Agency, continues to enhance Hampshire County Council's credibility and reputation as an authority that provides highly effective business and community support. Whilst Emily has recently taken up a new role to manage our ambitious tree planting programme across the county, I would like to take this opportunity and offer due recognition and a heartfelt thanks to all that Emily has achieved during the LEADER programme. And I think this is an example of an officer quietly getting on, doing their job, doing a fantastic job and being recognised, I think, across the country in terms of the work she has done. And we're all very grateful to the work that Emily has done. Sometimes people that and officers do this work don't always get recognised. That's why I was keen to make this known to all of us today. So well done to Emily. I'm sure we'd like, when we meet her, maybe pass on that as well to her as well. Okay, so we'll go straight on to, we have no deputations as I understand. Okay, thank you very much for that. So we go straight into working towards the economic recovery. I think Chief Executive, you're presenting that report. Thank you.
Thank you, councillors. This is your regular update report focusing upon working towards economic recovery, including the Pan-Hampshire County deal. You've got a very thoroughly presented narrative on the economic impact and recovery from COVID-19, the actions and activities that are all in hand, and also an update on the economic outlook. In terms of the Pan-Hampshire County deal, we have reached a conclusion in preparing with partners our ambitious Pan-Hampshire prospectus as a start point for negotiations with government. And as it says in the report, the County Council stands ready to negotiate a devolution deal with government through this ambitious Pan-Hampshire County deal, remains fully committed to the ambition and opportunities of a deal as set out in the report before you and previously reported on regular occasions to Cabinet on the basis that the county deal is anticipated to benefit the lives of residents and communities across Hampshire. Obviously, as the leader has highlighted, the current national political uncertainty has meant that we will hold that concluded prospectus in abeyance and will report back to Cabinet with further detail and a final prospectus when there is greater clarity on government's levelling up and devolution ambition and approach, and consider the most appropriate timeframes for engagement and government with government. And that will allow us, obviously, to take account of any potential framework changes to the current framework around the county deal, should that be changed with an incoming administration in central government. Thank you, colleagues.
Chief Executive, thank you very much. And I think this leaves us in a really good place. And I think a practical approach that we've taken, considering the circumstances we're in. And as I said earlier, until we get a bit more clarity where we are with central government and the ministers that we'll be talking to, we thought this was a practical approach to take. I'll also just note in terms of the progress we are making, regardless of that, in terms of the regeneration and growth partnerships. We've had quite a few meetings recently, and we are progressing with those, and that's something that we started before and should continue regardless of this process and that relationship we have with our districts and boroughs as well. Any questions from members? Councillor Warwick.
Thank you, Leader. I've just got a small comment to make, really, and just to congratulate you on this paper. I mean, it doesn't make easy reading. you sort of look to the next paragraph, but actually it sort of summarises the situation we face very nicely. So I just wanted to congratulate, and that sort of, it narrates the uncertainty we feel over national government and where that's going. And I guess it's nicely summarised in the final paragraph 74, the penultimate, your conclusion, because that sort of really says where we're at. We're prepared with the county deal, that prospectus, we're ready to go, and we wait to see what next with governance. And I suspect, Karen, a question for me is, presumably other counties are in a very similar position and are preparing very similar reports, I'm guessing. Thank you.
Yes, through you, Leader. The 9 organisations who were successful in the first round, the Wave 1 of Levelling Up, are continuing to work with officials in central government, and obviously they will continue to get to a point, I understand, of being ready to conclude their deals. Any other organisations that are currently working on proposals, I expect, are in the same position as ourselves, and putting a minor pause on progress just to allow us all to take account of any potential changes. Thank you.
Thank you. Just before bringing Councillor Heron in, Councillor Warwick, we're clearly monitoring the other 9 that are going through, and it is interesting to see that they are still progressing despite this. So I think we've done exactly the right thing by pausing at this. Let's learn from that and see what's happening there. And as I say, when we get that clarity in terms of ministers, it would be very useful for us in that position. Councillor Heron.
Chairman, thank you. And I first of all, I want to say thank you for this comprehensive report. There is an awful lot of detail in here. I think I just want to pick up, particularly sort of starting with paragraph 25 around the GVA output of Hampshire and how that has contracted by about 10% post-pandemic, and obviously with the issues with cost of living and the Ukraine situation. I think that highlights the work that this council is doing and needs to do in partnership with organisations, because we know our residents are struggling. We also know, looking in this report, that actually we have very high employment rates in Hampshire. So what we are looking to do here is to work with partners to improve incomes and outcomes for our residents. But we are equally mindful of inflation and the impact that wage increases do. So I think the key bit here, and I think this does come through in this detailed report, is the work that we do with partners to increase productivity and output. Because inflationary growth is triggered by wage inflation, cost inflation, but without the increase in productivity. And if we can, through our work, and the leader and I and Councillor Forster were at Farnborough Airport yesterday talking to businesses, if we can, through this engagement, through our growth and regeneration boards, through our partnership working, help companies to improve supply lines, increase innovation, have the confidence to invest in research and development, and the confidence to then develop products from that R&D. Because I think another issue, perhaps not in here, is perhaps we're not as good as a county, as a nation, of taking our research and development and bringing that through with the confidence of the market, when we really have that opportunity to grow our business base. And Chairman, forgive me, I do keep saying when we talk about growing businesses and profitability, it isn't for the sake of the business. We're not here to make bigger businesses. We're here to improve the lives of Hampshire residents, and we do that by having better competing, productive businesses in Hampshire. Working with businesses is a means to an end. It is not an end in itself. The end in itself is the lives and the welfare of our residents. So I welcome this report. We have a lot to do, but as the report says, there is an awful lot in here to be positive about as well. I think we start from a good base, Chairman.
Thank you, Councillor Heron, and you make some really good points. And you would have heard me say just a few times, it's about joining up the dots. So Councillor Warwick smiling because he's heard me say that many times. And it is about partnership working. If you can't work in partnership, you need to now, otherwise you don't achieve anything. And it was a really good event yesterday. I think our business engagement has improved already. We know we need to do that, and we are actively doing that. And the other thing that I always make the point of, and made this yesterday actually up at Farnborough, is about we always, we want somewhere nice to live, work and play. And actually the businesses all recognise that. The importance of those three together actually helps support them. And if we have a vibrant economy, that helps us as an authority deliver all those statutory duties that we have to do. Chief Executive, I'd like to make a further comment. Thank you.
Yeah, it was just to confirm back to you, obviously the whole ambition around the Pan-Hampshire County deal is about appreciating that we are a net contributor to the government. We could be an even greater net contributor through absolutely the points you made, increasing productivity and outcomes. And of course, all of that is driven by our desire to improve the lives of Hampshire residents. So completely agree. And hopefully in September, we'll get back on track again with the Pan-Hampshire County deal and attracting that infrastructure investment that's so important to make that difference. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you very much, Caroline. So I've no further comments. So as I say, an excellent report. So thank you very much for that. And I would like to go to the recommendations on page 17. Happy for everybody to agree and approve with the recommendations? Okay, it's great. Thank you very much. Okay, we move on to agenda item 7, end of year financial report.
Thank you, Leader. Good morning, councillors. Just start with an update on our COVID position. So we used all of our general COVID government grant in 21-22, and we had to supplement that with a further £25 million of our own resources. And in terms of the overall position, we still expect to use around 72 million of council resources to support COVID costs and losses over the period. We continue to make good progress on our savings programme to 2023, delivering 10 million of early savings last year, with a further 10 million predicted for this year. In terms of departmental spend for last year, overall departments were underspent by around 30 million, but 15 million of this was money given to us by the clinical commissioning groups, which will be used to continue our discharge to assess scheme during the current financial year. Corporate budgets underspent by nearly 14 million, and the proposal in the report is to utilise this funding in the manner set out in section G. And we also talk about our balances, which remain strong, but it is clear to say that this will be vital in tackling the financial challenge outlined in the next report. I'll leave it there, but happy to take any questions.
Yeah, thanks very much, Rob. And I say a very detailed report, and it's interesting, isn't it, when you look at the work that's gone on over the year and the detail that's gone into that and what our position is, but what we've been able to achieve by bringing sort of our prudent financial management over that period and forecasting forward, I think is important, that the work that we do, I think perhaps many other authorities don't do. Any comments from members? Councillor Oppenheimer.
Yeah, I just want to dwell on the issue of our balances, our reserves, in case anyone watching might think that's cause for us to relax and feel comfortable. The fact is, inflation is going to put pressure on our reserves. It's already happening, and we're already being asked to approve a £25 million fund for inflationary pressures. Well, we'll come to that in the MTFS. But I think the point is that the gap between inflation and our return is extremely high, higher than it's ever been before. So you can see in the Treasury Appendix, we're getting a return of 1.59%. That's nowhere near inflation of 10%. And even though we will expect inflation to peak this year, and we'll expect our returns to go up a bit as interest rates go up, there's still going to be a big gap of 6 or 7%. So that pressure will continue for the coming years. And we will see further erosion of our spending power, our purchasing power with our reserves. And we will almost certainly have to, approve further cost increases for capital programs. So, in fact, we need to be very cautious about the reserves and explain to people repeatedly that this doesn't give us any reason to feel comfortable about the gap in our revenue budget. Thank you.
Thank you, Russell. Rob, would you just like to comment on the reserves, please?
Yeah, I mean, so we talk about this a lot in our reserve strategy. So a large proportion of those reserves are set aside to meet the capital programme. So they underpin £400 million worth of spend. And the reserves that we do have that are available to utilise more flexibly, it's those that will get us to 25-26. So when we're talking about the next report, we need the firepower in order for us to actually to get to 25-26, and it's those reserves that underpin that position.
Thanks, Rob, and I think that's a really important point to make, and thanks, Russell, for raising that, because sometimes I think it does need an explanation in terms of the reserves of where we are. We have to hold a certain amount because we legally have to. Quite often, and there is indeed at the moment in the reserves money that we hold on behalf of other people as well, which sometimes gets forgotten. And then when you look at the capital programme, that's already set out and that money is allocated. Now, if we don't have that, that means things that we said that we're going to do might not happen. But as Rob has explained, that's what leaves us in this position, I think, unlike many other authorities, that we're looking at a position where we're now thinking about 25-26. We're not looking next year, we're looking at that. So that gives us that space in terms, if you like, to look at that programme that we're running at the moment. Councillor Heron, a comment.
Chair, I just want to reiterate, I think it's really useful looking back at 21-22 before we look forward, because I think we do have to be clear to our residents where we're coming from. You know, we are in a very good position compared to other councils. The problem is that as a whole, upper tier authorities, the way that we are funded, the burdens that are being put upon us, the growth we have in adult social care and children's services mean that they are not sustainable the way they are at the moment unless additional funding streams are found in, I used to talk about the medium to long term. I think for many, I'm going to say for short and medium term. For us, hopefully, the medium. So I think we do have to be clear. I think when we have the next debate, I think we have to be clear to our residents that Hampshire is an exceptionally well-run authority because we have made very difficult decisions ahead of time so that we haven't squandered money trying to put off the inevitable, trying to prop up the unsustainable, but that only puts us in a better position than the others. It doesn't put us in a safe and stable position. So, Chair, I think that is a very key message that as we go into the next paper that says however well run you are, however efficient you are, if you are in an unsustainable funding model, you are only kicking the can down the road. Thank you.
Thanks, Edward. That's a really good point, but it also enforces the point that we made previously about having a vibrant, successful economy and the work with our business as well, and that's the very reason why we're doing that as well. Any further comment from members? If not, Councillor Warwick.
Yeah, only really to reinforce what Councillor Heron's just said. Actually, if you look at the Chief Internal Auditor's reports, he backs up exactly what you've said. So how well, and hats off to you, Rob, how well is this authority being run? But there's those external influences that we can't influence that really are sort of influencing our financial position. But it's good to see those positive internal audit reports as well. Thank you.
Thanks very much, Councillor Warwick. No further comments. So I'm going to take us to the, and thanks very much for the report, Rob, as well. Take us to the recommendations. And happy to accept them, and hopefully everybody is on page 35 of the report. Lots of nods, and hopefully I can hear some yeses. Good, that helps. Thank you very much. Okay, so we'll now move on to agenda item 8. Developing a medium-term financial strategy. Rob again, thank you.
Thank you, Leader. I think it's fair to say that we have a bit of a perfect storm in financial terms at the moment. So we obviously have the impact of inflation and the workforce pressures that we're seeing. We are seeing very high growth and increased prices in the adult social care market. As you'll hear later, there are government social care reforms that are being introduced, which we believe are not fully funded. And current government funding is flat over the next 2 years, despite those increasing pressures that we face. So the report sets out that overall we predict the deficit to 25-26 could be as high as £200 million before we consider the impact of the social care reforms. As Councillor Heron pointed out, this is really not of our doing. It is simple mathematics. At the moment, the amount of money that we receive from government grant and increases in council tax does not in any way go towards meeting the costs of normal inflation and growth, and we are seeing hyperinflation and hyper growth in some areas. So it is a perfect storm. So what are we doing about it? So you'll see in the report that we're suggesting to support the capital programme, we're going to put a inflation underwrite in place. That will mean that the schemes that are currently in progress can continue. And I'm also asking for delegated authority to allocate funding to meet inflationary pressures in the current year. So we're still assessing what those look like. The likelihood is that even though that we provide for contingencies in our revenue budget, those aren't going to be sufficient to meet the sorts of pressures that we expect to see this year. So it may well be we have to dip into the reserves that we've just been talking about in order to shore up the current year. My concern is that those costs get baked in and have a further impact on the forecast that we've prepared. So in budget terms, we are considering at the moment whether we are able to close that financial gap through our own actions, but we are also considering what changes the government could make in order to actually help us in that regard. We are lobbying MPs, and I have been having discussions with DLUC and Treasury officials about our forecasts and the position that we're in. So all of this work will come together later in the year. So there's two important pieces of information that we're waiting for. So we're expecting a 2-year settlement in terms of local government finance in December, and also we would hope to know more about the funding and the distribution for the social care reforms and have completed our fair cost of care review process. So we will obviously report back to Cabinet in due course, again in December and then again in February. But happy to take any questions, Leader.
Rob, thank you very much. And some of the points I think we probably covered in the previous paper, and I'll come to Councillor Harrow in a minute. I just want to pick up on the point in terms of, I put out a press statement, I think it was last week, in terms of outlining exactly what our position was. But also in terms of our MPs and lobbying the MPs. I did have a meeting lined up previously, but of course certain events in Westminster took over from that, I think, for a little while. But I have to say, we've arranged another meeting, I think it's on the 9th of September, so we hopefully will know who the Prime Minister is in, and presumably who all the what the Cabinet positions will be. So we have a meeting organised in Portcullis House. We've invited all our MPs, and we will be setting this out. I'll be going with Rob and the Chief Executive, setting out very clearly what our position is. So, and already previously to that, had a programme in place of engagement with our MPs, making it very clearly what the impact is. And as you made the point earlier, Rob and Edward, about it's not it's not our doing, if you like. It is something that the position that we are now in, and also in terms of the growth that we're seeing in social care, children's services, and adults as well. So, so I will just say at this point, Rob, thank you for the team, you and the work that your team have done on this. Councillor Heron.
Chairman, thank you. I think there's two points I want to make. The first is, I think we are perhaps seeing this earlier than other councils because of the horizon we scan at. I think that's the right way to do things, but it creates two issues with that. One is that we are talking about things that perhaps other councils aren't doing. We are talking about gaps and figures that other councils perhaps, I'm sure they are slightly cited, but aren't fully cited on. And the other one is it does mean that we plan early in this council, and there's a reason for that. You know, if you need to take 20, God love the days when we have to take £20 million out of our budget. If you have to take £20 million out of your budget, if you take it out this year, not next year, you're £20 million better off. You have a bit more flexibility. So we have always been sensible. If we have looked at going, the earlier you can take a saving for something you have to do, the more you have either reserves or you use less of your reserves, which perhaps is the way to talk about it in this day and age, to give yourself future flexibility. So there is a real issue here that we are cited on a problem earlier than perhaps our colleagues in other authorities. we, quite rightly in my mind, for the protection of the most vulnerable in our society, we have to act as far as we can on these things. And it does worry me, Chairman, that and I know we make this point to our MPs, that we cannot wait inactive to see whether solutions will come down. That is not a safe, prudent way. If we can see a problem coming, obviously in a planned and sustained way through our transformation programme, but actually we're going to have to start planning for that. So there is a greater urgency in this from government to respond and support and give us guidance once they are able, than simply saying, oh, well, it's 25, 26, we'll look at it then. Because actually, we, to protect our most vulnerable, may have had to make some of these changes having to some of our services well before that. So I think the first one I want to be clear on is, we all need to have a look on that horizon, and we are, and I know, Leader, you are impressing on our MPs that there's no point in trying to ride to the rescue after we've had to take the corrective action to try and mitigate the harm. And the second one, Chairman, I just want to touch on is almost back to the previous papers and the county deal and things like that. We are, in Hampshire, not afraid of being accountable for the performance of what we do. We have talked about all the work that we are doing to business growth and encouraging growth within our region and how that has the effect on the net economy. Well, if government wants to talk to us about a funding mechanism whereby we support ourselves based on that growth we generate, that's fine by us. In fact, we're still happy to give them a large share of the growth revenue through VAT, corporation tax, all sorts of other taxes. We're not asking for all the benefits of growth that we put into a national economy, but actually we are not afraid of having discussions with government about funding models where we are responsible for the decisions, but we are equally responsible for the decisions that generate the revenue. Because, Chairman, I think we have shown consistently, when we're given the flexibility and freedom, we are more than capable of doing this. It is just, unfortunately, at the moment, we are constrained by a funding model where we have no control over demand, we have no control over cost because of national issues, and we have no control over the funding. The only thing we have the control over is that budget of what we spend on it. And we cannot continue where between income, demand and cost, the only thing we have control of is cost.
Thank you, Edward. Carolyn Gloddick.
Councillor Heron, thank you very much. You're right, you probably hear our narrative slightly earlier than you hear the narrative of our comparator upper tier councils, but rest assured that may be the case in public, but in private discussions with other chief executives, it is, as Rob Carr said, a national funding problem, and we are all as equally concerned about the future. In terms of timing, one of the clear messages that we got from DLUC and Treasury was to speak to them sooner rather than later. Don't do what the other organisations have had to do, which is almost the point after they've gone over the tipping point to start to have conversations with central government departments about how best to recover, because it always is more costly and more time consuming to recover than it is to make plans in advance. So certainly if we're looking at a financial settlement in December of this year, now is absolutely the time that we need to start saying very clearly and very loudly that the funding position does not work, certainly for upper tier local authorities. And now is the time we have to have that conversation, because it's only a few months before we have a 2-year settlement. And once that 2-year settlement is baked in, it's very difficult to see that changing. Obviously, you exhibit very sound financial management, and since 2010, you have been very successful at managing a medium-term financial strategy that sees you properly plan and properly deliver the changes so that we have the least disruption and impact on the residents of Hampshire. And continuing with that strategy must be the right answer for us. But saying clearly and saying loudly that the funding situation must change is obviously something that the leader and cabinet are very focused on and will be very helpful in that regard. Thank you, leader.
Karen, thank you. Edward, you make lots of important points, valid points. I think the key thing I picked out from that is the word about flexibility. So the idea of a county deal in terms of that, and we'll see what evolves from those discussions when we get to that point, and what if you like, powers get devolved to us. But what we need is the flexibility on how we look at how we raise our own funds, but more importantly, the flexibility on how we spend it. And I think that's the key thing that will impact us the most, I think, from that point of view. So thank you for that. Any further points from any other members? Okay. Russell.
Yeah.
Councillor
I just want to say one thing quickly. I think whoever the new Prime Minister is going to be, we'd all agree that they've got some pretty difficult things in their in tray. They've got to tackle a backlog at NHS waiting lists. We've got to increase defence spending to meet the threat from Russia. And there's obviously a need to catch up kids in schools following the pandemic. We'd all agree about that. But what I hope is that we will get a Prime Minister who understands the role local government plays in delivering priorities that are very important to the country. And you think of what we've achieved on net zero and nature recovery in Hampshire, it's pretty impressive. Also in terms of levelling up communities, the government needs local government to deliver on that, and through the county deal we can. But I think it's also important to talk about, the other things that we do at Hampshire County Council, whether it's libraries, museums, country parks, looking after people. If the government doesn't fix this problem in local government funding, then so much of that is at risk. And so, my message to MPs and to the new Prime Minister will be, it's a false economy to skimp on local government funding, because we won't then be able to deliver on the priorities that are so important to this country.
Russell, thank you. Well, as I said, I will be with the corporate management team making those points very clear when we go up on the first week of September. But the points you make about everything across the whole authority is to go back to the point I made about having somewhere nice to live, somewhere nice to work, somewhere nice to play. They're all as important as one another, if you like. So that brings the whole authority together in that, and the principles behind that of how we, looking at how we forecast our financial position. No further comments. So looking to the recommendations on page 105. Everybody happy to accept the recommendations? That's great. Thank you very much. Thank you, Rob. Okay, moving on to agenda item 9, social care funding reforms, including the fair cost of care. Inviting Graham Allen to present the report. Good timing, Graham.
Thank you, Leader. Good morning, everyone. I'm joined in the room this morning by my colleague Sarah Snowden, Assistant Director for Digital and Transformation, and Sarah is the architect and indeed the custodian of many of the reforms that are detailed in the report. So if there are any particularly technical questions, I will perhaps defer to Sarah. So this report sets out the breadth and depth of the social care reforms which are embedded within the Health and Care Act 2022. Essentially, these reforms relate to 3 elements as detailed in paragraph 10 of the report, and they are changes to the means test and care cap. Secondly, implementation of section 18.3 of the Care Act 2014, which enables self-funders access to the local authority commissioning rate for social care services, and also what's known as the fair cost of care exercise, which is something that we are diligently undertaking at this current time. It's important to note that the Minister for Social Care recently announced, in response to a ministerial question tabled in Parliament, that some elements of these reforms would now be staggered. And essentially, what the ministerial response outlines is that for those people that are self-funders and new to the social care system, the reforms will apply from the 1st of October 2023. So anyone new coming into the system after the 1st of October 2023 will have the social care reforms applied in terms of metering and access to local authority care rates. For those people that are already within the care system and self-funding their care, the ministerial response outlines that they will have access to the reforms, the metering and the purchasing of care at the new rates from April or by April of 2025. So there's some staggering there. We are waiting detailed guidance precisely in terms of how that can be enacted by local authorities, including ourselves, and indeed the communication both at a national governmental level in terms of this recent change, and that will need to be complemented by local communications too. However, it's important to say that the forecasts that are contained within the report before you still hold based on the modelling that we've undertaken. The slight issue that we will continue to work through is the timing of when some of those financial and indeed workforce and process changes will hit, but we believe that the impacts will still be the same. The dates may change, but we will work that through once we've got that detailed guidance, which is promised in due course. So essentially all I wanted to add is that the financial impacts of these reforms are set out in paragraphs 15 to 25. As I say, some of the timings around that may change as we go forward and understand better in terms of guidance that will be issued in due course. And the work that we're currently undertaking to prepare for these reforms is covered in paragraphs 26 to 42. Beyond that, sir, I just wanted to say that the recommendations are still as set out in the report, essentially seeking that the government fund the full costs of the policy, that elements are staggered, and indeed we do now have some staggering, which is really positive, but we need to work that through, as I say, in due course, and that we receive in due course continued guidance to inform preparation and indeed the enactment of these reforms as we go forward. More than happy to take any questions.
Graham, thank you very much. And going sort of to the previous discussions about, that has been done to us, if you like, you couldn't think of a better example from that point of view, and about the impact that it has on the whole authority, if you like, from that point of view. It's interesting in terms of the staggering that the figures still stay the same. So am I right to believe it does sort of ease the situation in the short term, but over the long term period it remains the same?
Our concern, I think, probably has been now for some time that we're just over a year away from the original date of implementation of these social care reforms, technically from the 1st of October of 2023. We are still waiting for huge amounts of guidance in terms of, so how do we best do this? What's the messaging, the communication to residents to help them to understand? So we're still, if you like, pressured by waiting for that guidance. There are now 6 trailblazer local authorities across the country. The work that they are doing at this moment in time is working through actually how do you assess need? How do you need to assess need for those people that are self-funding their care? How might we need to do it in future? It says within the detail of the report that Hampshire and indeed councils across the South East generally, the number of self-funding residents is far higher than in other parts of the country. So potentially 10,000 people in Hampshire today are self-funding their care. Our concern was always on the 1st of October or shortly before, we'd have a queue form very rapidly of 10,000 people saying, please assess me because I want the meter to start running, please. This staggering has some beneficial impact on that, but as I say, until we work through based on guidance, we won't know precisely when that will continue to hit, and it will continue to hit in terms of people needing to be assessed as we go forward, indeed the financial consequence of that through the fair cost of care and access to our rates.
Okay, so in terms of that, the demographics makes a huge difference in terms of not, one size doesn't fit all from that point of view. So in terms of the trailblazers, does that give a broad range there in terms of that, and how do we correspond with them, or what engagement do we have with them?
So 2 of the 6 trailblazers look more like us as a local authority than the other 4, and the 2 that look more like us are Oxfordshire and North Yorkshire. However, there's still a difference in terms of the demographic and the proportion of self-funders that both of those councils have in comparison to us. So if you look at a sector, for example, the care home market, the self-funder element here in Hampshire is give or take 60% of the care home sector is occupied by people that are wholly self-funding their care. It's less than that, as I understand it, in both Oxfordshire and North Yorkshire. So that's where some of those cost pressures, particularly in terms of access to local authority rates, will fall in due course.
Okay, that's great, thanks. So it's the point really, isn't it, that the impact on some authorities is far greater than others was the point that I want to make. Councillor Warwick.
Yes, thank you, Graham. I just wanted to get your opinion on the Care 3 toolkit and whether that was something you or we'd had input into, or whether it's been sort of thrust upon you, as it were. And then the other question is really around recruiting staff who are going to be doing those assessment, because that's intrusive, and I guess there's an element of training is going to be involved, and how you're going to meet that challenge. Thank you.
Yeah, if I can come to the assessment question first, and I think one of the comments I would make is I think we, along with every other local authority in the country, will need to apply innovation and some different thinking to what the term assessment means with regard to these care reforms. So across England, there's currently a shortfall across adults and children's services of around about 10,000 social workers. The national modelling suggests in terms of social care reforms that it could require up to an additional 4,000 social workers, given the quantum of people that are currently self-funding. So that would give us a deficit of 14,000 rather than the 10,000 we've got at the moment. Now clearly, every local authority, if we think the only way of undertaking an assessment is to employ more social workers or staff that can undertake a traditional social care assessment, will be fighting against each other in terms of onboarding staff. I think it will require a range of different ways of solving the issue, including supported self-assessment. So if you go back to some of the central tenets of the Care Act, our responsibility in law as a local authority is to verify information and make judgment in terms of eligible social care need, and then to make decisions in terms of how those needs can best be met. And that doesn't mean that we deliver, we buy. It's how can the person best be supported. So we need to think differently, and our role is not to narrate somebody's story and reach a judgment. It's to receive information and reach a judgment. So I think we can do that in a variety of ways. So I don't think it's simply a rush to additional staff, but certainly when we look at some other aspects in terms of things like financial assessments, processing and making sure that we've got systems in place to enable the metering to tick over as we go forward, inevitably there will be some workforce implications there alongside some digital and some technical solutions. In terms of then solutions in terms of things like fair cost of care and how we're doing this, some elements are being thrust upon us. We've got a timeline that we need to meet that's been set by Department of Health and Social Care. Some of the tools are helpful, some are less helpful. It's inevitable. So we will carefully pick our way through, and the timeline for us means that by the 14th of October, we need to be submitting information to government in terms of what we believe the fair cost of care exercise looks like here in Hampshire. And there will be, I'm sure, further information and indeed some back and forth following that submission in October.
Okay, Rob Carr.
Sorry, just to give a bit more information on the numbers, if I may. So the figures that are quoted in Graham's report and my report of around 90 million potentially unfunded costs. That's derived from the money that we've got this year, extrapolated forward to the national figures. But the point I would make, the money that we've got this year is for the implementation of the scheme, so it isn't necessarily representative of the money that we will get. So the government is going to consult on the methodology for distributing the funding that they have got. So I think the good news is everybody recognises that it is those areas with high numbers of self-funders that will have the most cost. So we would hope that money would be skewed towards us. The bad news is, as set out in the report, nationally there isn't enough funding for the expected increase.
Okay, thanks for that, Rob. Any further comments from members? Graham, just to say thank you, and I would just like to say at this point, Councillor Fairhurst couldn't be with us today, But she has done, I know, an enormous amount of work on this and kept us and myself and Cabinet fully briefed on this. And she has given me some notes to today. I won't go through those now, but thank you for those. I know you helped with that as well. So I say thank you and your team, certainly for the work that you have done and working with Rob as well. But it's that position we're in. But the point I want to go back to in terms of about the impact on different authorities is different from that. And we need to understand and recognise that, but then taking into the point that Rob made in terms of the overall fund as well for that. So thank you for that. No further comments from anybody. I'll take us to the recommendations then as set out on page 125. All happy to agree with the recommendations? Okay, that's great. Thanks very much. Thanks, Graham. Okay, we'll take us through to agenda item 10, Serving Hampshire. And I think Jack Broughton, you're going to present the report. Thank you. Thanks, Jack.
Morning. So you have in front of you the year-end report, which asks Cabinet to note the Council's performance for 2021-2022, including progress to advance inclusion and diversity, progress against our climate change strategy and action plan, and also reference to the determination of the Local Government and Social Care Ombudsman for 21-22. So in terms of the paper, it notes strong performance against the 4 strategic objectives. So paragraph 11, so that's pages 138 to 141, includes a wide range of examples of such performance, including apprenticeship starts, returning to nearly pre-pandemic levels, positive feedback from a piloted joint target area inspection of front door services delivered through children's services with other partners, opening of our first recycling road materials site, which supports both carbon emission and savings, and continued support for resettlement of Afghan refugees and the establishment of our programme to support homes for Ukraine. So a wide range of performance delivery quoted there. The report goes on to note the positive performance around our 26 agreed corporate performance targets. So that's paragraphs 13 through to 15, 21 of which are recorded as low risk with 5 as medium risk. All those that are medium risk have got necessary mitigations and plans in place to support them. And where they have not been met, they were considered to be stretch targets. So less of a surprise to us than for others. The report references 3 measures which have shown poorer performance in 2020-21. They are noted in paragraph 16 of your report. And then the paper goes on to note several wider areas of risk that all departments are surfacing. Those won't be a surprise to you, around labour force pressures, inflationary pressures, and then costs and availability of construction materials and pressures, etc. In terms of inclusion and diversity, the report notes good progress, first strategy launched, staff survey reports, improved experiences of well-being and feelings of engagement from our staff. We've got 7 priority actions for inclusion and diversity and 3 for well-being, and those are being monitored through normal corporate governance. They're included in your report at paragraph 23, and our annual report went the week before last to EHCC committee. Similarly, with climate change, the report highlights the progress made against our 4 climate change projects, and the annual report was presented in October 2021, which covered progress against the 4 projects in more detail. And then finally, I'll hand over to Paul, who's just going to say a word or 2 about the report from the Ombudsman.
Thanks, Jack. Members, paragraphs 32 to 36 and Appendix 3 in the report set out matters relating to the Local Government and Social Care Ombudsman complaints against the Council. As in previous years, the report contains information at paragraph 34 relating to overall complaints to the Ombudsman in the year 2020 to 2021. That's drawn from statistics published on the Ombudsman's website, and the 2020 to 2021 data is the latest year's data that's available. Data for last year, so 2021-2022, has not yet been published, but it will be later in the year. Paragraph 36 and Appendix 3 contain information about the determination of complaints investigated in 2021 to 2022, so the last financial year. And these are the complaints that we know about because we received the details from the Ombudsman, but we also know that the vast majority of complaints made to the Ombudsman aren't actually investigated. So that 23 complaints set out in the report is likely to only be a small proportion of the total complaints received in that period. And as indicated in the report, all the determinations in 2021 to 2022 relate to adult health and care and children's services matters, but that should be seen in the context of the significant pressures on those services caused by a number of factors, not least the COVID pandemic. So that's all I've got to say, Jack. Thanks.
Thank you.
Okay, that's great, Jack. Thanks very much. I'll just make a few comments to see if other members want to come in from the point of view. I always say this in terms of when we get these reports, especially when we look at the previous Cabinet papers, and about the pressures that we've been through and looked at, actually how well the County Council has performed and functioned and how successful it has been. I know we then talk about the complaints and things like that as well, but then, as I say, you put that into the scale in terms of the pressures that some departments have been under, as well as coping with COVID as well. So I think it's very easy to sometimes sit there and think, well, you know, what we're looking at in terms of the budget position, where we are, but actually the authority has performed really well, and it is really encouraging to see some of those stats and figures in there. So well done in terms of putting the report together, but to all officers, I suppose I should say. So I think we'd make that point. It's well worth a read from that point of view. Not everybody probably does look at these very thoroughly, as do. I do read it, I could assure you. And I would encourage others to do the same. Any comments from any other members in terms of the report? Councillor North. Kirsty.
Thank you, Chairman. I just wanted to take a moment as well to thank officers for this report. As you say, it does show the good progress we as a county council are making towards our corporate and strategic priorities. I also wanted to extend thanks to the senior officers from each of our departments who took this item to Policy and Resource Committee. It allowed for a much broader debate and was welcomed by all there. So a new approach, and one I hope we continue with going forward. Touching on the inclusion, diversity and wellbeing focus, this was welcomed by Employment in Hampshire Committee, and I think we were all keen to encourage further engagement and strengthen the data set that we use to measure these aims, to ensure that that is sort of easy to analyse going forward. And we've already touched on the economy and jobs a lot this morning, and the three areas of concern won't come as a surprise to you all. But to touch on the local government ombudsman complaints, I think that is really positive, the reduction in investigations and the lessons to be learnt there. But I know, as played out at Policy and Resource, the departments are implementing changes which are recommended as part of the Ombudsman's recommendations, and so they're actively working on resolving those further. So just a big congratulations and well done to our staff.
That's great, Kirsty, thanks very much. And also, Ezra, a mode of congratulations to you in terms of your new role in inclusion and diversity and the good work that's done. And I know the Chief Executive takes a very keen interest in that as well. So very pleased to see that and the progress that has been made. I think specifically over a fairly short period of time in terms of the new position for you as well. So thank you. Any further comments from members? Okay. I'll take you through to the recommendations on page 135. They're happy to accept the recommendations. Okay, that's great. Thank you very much. Thanks, Jack. Okay, we'll now move on to agenda item 11, the economic strategy. We have Stuart Jarvis and Richard Kenny. I don't know, you starting, Stuart, I think, or Richard? Okay, that's great. Thank you very much.
Yes, thank you, Chairman. I'll just briefly introduce the report, and similar to my colleague Graham Allen earlier, I've got a colleague here who knows the detail in case there's any technical questions which arise. Just by way of introduction, Chairman, I just wanted to say that basically the economic strategy that's before Cabinet today forms a derivation and a further development of the Hampshire 2050 framework, which I know you're familiar with. And whilst the Hampshire 2050 work has moved forward with pace on climate change and the issues associated with that, the economy was also a central part of the Hampshire 2050 vision, and this strategy sets out a framework to try to translate the economic objectives from Hampshire 2050 appropriately contextualised for the economic circumstances that we find ourselves in, but also setting out a long-term direction of travel and vision for the development of the Hampshire economy to try to realise the ambitions of the Hampshire 2050 vision. And at that point, Chairman, if I may, I'll hand over to Richard to briefly take you through the strategy and the methodology that was used to derive it.
That's great. Thanks, Stuart. Yeah, over to you, Richard. Thank you.
Thank you, Leader. So just very quickly then, I mean, the purpose of this report is essentially to outline a draft economic strategy for Hampshire. And I think we've already sort of touched on that earlier this morning in terms of why that is so important. And as Stuart has said, it's got the foundations coming out from all the Hampshire 2050 work that was done before. It essentially seeks approval to go into consultation with partners. We can't really have a strategy without getting their buy-in and starting to agree who's going to contribute what, who can help us in terms of the delivery of the priorities and the interventions that we set out in those the strategy. And in fact, we will need some help in terms of working up the key priorities and those interventions. So I think that's quite key. And then once it comes back from that period of consultation, subject to your agreement, then the report seeks delegated authority for the leader to sign off the final version following and based on that consultation. Just to say a little bit more about, why the strategy. I think this builds on the leader's statement that was made about why a strong economy is so important. And the benefits of putting an economic lens across everything that Hampshire County Council is doing, both in terms of its services, but also in terms of its partnerships and its collaborations. The strategy itself has all the ingredients that you would expect from an economic strategy. The drivers are set out, the levers, the objectives. It works with a number of scenarios to build in resilience, and it sets out a number of policies and proposed and possible interventions for further working up, as I said earlier, in terms of the partnership. Where I think the strategy differs, in terms of previous economic strategies and other economic strategies across the country, is very much that it adopts the government's 6 capitals approach. It's adapted slightly from the version of that came out in the Levelling Up white paper from government, but it very much aligns itself with the thinking coming through from national government in terms of those priorities. And I think that's really important, because the point was made earlier that it's not about supporting businesses just for the sake of businesses. It's about improving the quality of life for all of our residents. And I think that 6 capitals approach will definitely get us away from just simply focusing on GDP, but thinking about rising living standards, about sustainability, and so on. So really, Leader, I'll leave it there. The strategy is there for everyone to see, and Stuart and I are here if there are any questions. Thank you.
Okay, thank you very much. I'll make a few comments and then see if other members want to come in. So, Councillor Heron mentioned earlier we were at Farnborough yesterday, and that was about meeting and engaging with businesses. And the whole idea with that was actually setting out and actually giving them a sort of a first glance, if you like, of the economic strategy. and those discussions that we had with them, and about going forward, about their input into that in terms of how we then build on where we are. But I think it's important that you mentioned the 2050 Commission, or Stuart, you did, in terms that that was an agreement that we had a few years ago now that overarches everything. And then sat below that is our economic strategy. And then within that and below that sits all our policies. And it starts to give a very clear direction of where the County Council is going. And we've heard a lot of talk this morning, haven't we, through all those papers in terms of economic development and the importance of a thriving, healthy economy. And that business engagement is going to be really important in that going forward. And it is about the partners, and we said that earlier, and I'm going to repeat it. I know Councillor Warwick look at me in terms of, joining up the dots, and I go back to the point, somewhere nice to live, somewhere nice to work, and somewhere nice to play. And that is a key part of that we will take through the economic strategy. And I have to say that the businesses that we've spoken to were really encouraged to see this, and I think they're seeing a new direction for the authority, and the understanding of the other pressures that we have in terms of social care and the importance of having that and how it helps us deliver that as well. So thank you for that. Other members, any points? Councillor Oppenheimer.
I just wanted to say how much I welcome this strategy, and particularly dwell on the inclusion of the social capital element within the 6 capitals framework. I think it's just very correct to say that Hampshire has fantastic cultural and heritage assets and countryside assets, and that if we enhance those and promote them, it will play a big part in our economic development. I actually take it as very much a personal challenge, this strategy, that, I've got to go out there and work in partnership with all of our stakeholders, communities, districts, town councils. We've got to make sure that we turbocharge our cultural assets and make it part of that town centre regeneration. It might be making sure we've got the right venues. It might be public art, anything that promotes the visitor economy, getting better footfall on our high streets that will help our shops and restaurants and all our other businesses. So I think it is very timely as we embark on the regeneration and growth partnerships, leader, that we've talked about already today, that we keep culture and heritage and countryside at the forefront of our minds, and certainly that's what I intend to do. Thank you.
That's great, thanks very much. Councillor Heron.
Chairman, thank you. I'm not going to say much, because I think we've covered an awful lot of this in our earlier discussions, and I will say I really welcome this draft strategy, and I think to go out now to further engage with our partners, who said we started that at Farnborough. But I do just want to say, and to sort of conclude, that I was really pleased, paragraph 5, and I think it really sets out at the beginning there, and I'm going to read it because anyone watching. The central mission of the strategy is to improve productivity, to drive growth, and to improve standards of living. And I think that is the thing that is underlying the entirety of this. As Councillor Oppenheimer has talked about, as we move forward, we want to have a vibrant ecology and environment. We want to have a sustainable way of life. We want to have joy and happiness for our residents. And I don't think councils talk about this enough. We want our residents to have happy and joyful and healthy and sustainable lives. And that is, like, when we talk about economic strategies and all that thing, it sounds incredibly boring. But actually it is the way that we deliver that thing that we are here for, which is to deliver safe, when we talk about our adult services, our children's services, happy, joyful, fulfilling, sustainable lives for our residents. So, Chairman, with all that on its shoulders, I welcome our consulting on this strategy.
Well, Councillor Heron, I'm absolutely delighted you're happy and joyful, and it gives you that sort of warm feeling, and Councillor Oppenheimer as well. Well, I don't know how many times I can say this in one session, but I'm going to go back to my point. Somewhere nice to live, somewhere nice to work, somewhere nice to play, and I think that sums it up, and that's the aims of the strategy and the importance of that. And as I say, what really pleased me was talking to businesses that they recognise that, because it makes them a healthy business if their staff and their workforce and their families are happy as well. So you make a really good point, so thank you for that. Okay. Anybody else got any further comments to make? I very much welcome the report. And Stuart, you know, there's something I've been talking to you about for a while. And I said to you about sort of, you know, looking at the authority. The world has changed. Myself trying to understand how that's changed and what the impact, what does that mean for the authority. And I think this strategy starts to pull that together, as I say, sitting under that 2050 Commission sort of framework that we had previously, very much helps that and lines it up. And I know in terms of that, and the commissioners that we had for that, I'm sure will welcome the report as well, because it very much does line that up. So if there's no further comments from any other members, I'll take so thank you very much, Stuart, and to the team and all the team for the report. Take us to the recommendations on page 173. Are we happy to accept those recommendations? We are. That's great. Okay, thank you very much. Thank you, Stuart. Thank you, Richard. We'll now move on to agenda item 12, local enterprise partnerships and integration. I think that's you again, Stuart.
Yes, Chairman. Again, I also got my colleague here who understands the technicalities of the government consultation in cases, and so I'll just briefly introduce it and pass on to Richard to kind of just take you very briefly through the detail. Essentially, the LEP review, the government review of local enterprise partnerships, has linked the transition to devolution, which therefore means areas not in the first wave of devolution are in an extended transitional period. And I think it's important for Hampshire businesses and residents that we engage early and effectively with the two LEPs that are involved in the Hampshire area, both of which also extend beyond the Hampshire area, and therefore it's important that we work with our neighbours on that. But it's important that we secure greater alignment to ensure continuity and to maximise the benefit of the investment and the interventions that the LEPs make in this interim transitional period for the benefit of Hampshire businesses and residents. And this strategy, the LEP integration paper, attempts to set out a framework for that. But I'll pass to Richard to just very briefly explain the key points, if I may, Chairman.
Thanks, Stuart. Yeah, Richard, thank you.
Thank you. Yeah, so just very briefly, as Stuart says, you know, we've had a lot of uncertainty for some time about the future of LEPs and an awful lot of speculation, and that all ended in March of this year when the two Secretaries of State, from the one from Bays and one from DLUC, wrote to all LEP chief executives and various other chief executives involved in the devolution world about the future, and they set out a set of guidance within that letter. It's a very complicated set of guidance, and this report sets out what that guidance intends, and essentially it intends for LEP integration to happen in a way in which the functions of LEPs will be embedded within upper tier authorities as part of devolution deals. The report seeks approval for four main things. Firstly, to progress the discussions with the LEPs about their one-year delivery plans and submissions to government. So both of our LEPs, as Stuart has rightly pointed out, have submitted their delivery plans for 2022-23. So that gives them a stay for that period. And those delivery plans are important for us to engage with, and also for us to engage with in the context of what the LEPs themselves feel about transition and integration. So those conversations will go on with both the Solent LEP and with the EM3 LEP. The second thing that it seeks approval for is for a LEP integration plan for January 2023. The government set out two timescales, and this is the latter one, and that's because the timescales are dependent upon a conversation with government actually happening and devolution to starting to be moved within an area. So we're aiming to do that, but it's subject to progress in Hampshire on a county deal or some other form of devolution. Thirdly, to explore the development of a business engagement forum, member-led, and I think that's essentially important because any devolution arrangements that emerge need to engage the business voice and the functions of the LEPs, and we've got the work that we did as part of Hampshire 2050 in terms of the place board, and there is obviously some connection with that, so there is an obvious link to be made there with some of the businesses that are engaging in that. So what we're proposing to do is to start working up the proposals for what a business engagement forum might look like. And then fourthly, the main other thing really is to continue the conversations with the neighbouring areas around devolution when there is more certainty in the environment, when after the 5th of September it's a bit clearer about the government moving forward and its position on levelling up and on county deals. So I won't go in any more detail, but essentially what we're trying to do here is build on the foundations that the LEPs have provided, the assets and the developments that exist, and to make the most of those and to enter into conversations with those LEPs in how we best move that forward as part of any devolution deal that might emerge in the future. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you very much. I'll go to other members in a minute. I think this is really useful because we've been through uncertain times ourselves, not fully understanding what the LEP's position is, and also for them as well. And I know we have had a good engagement. We've got some more meetings coming up, fairly soon with Sonat LEP, and we've had various discussions with Enterprise M3. We have Councillor Heron and Councillor Chad that sit on those LEP boards. So we have good engagement already through there. But I think this does give us a bit of direction in terms of how we see the future for them and how our engagement with them is, and especially around the skills and our training, I think, which is an area that they're focusing on as well. But I think it needed a bit of clarity in that direction in terms of the business engagement, because one thing that makes it difficult for businesses when they're not sure who they're talking to at some point. So it's really useful that we've got this now clearly set out. I'm going to go to members if anybody wants to make a comment on this. No, okay, so thank you very much. I think it's a very useful document for us, as I say, for them as well. So I'll take us to the recommendations as set out on page 273. We're happy to accept the recommendations. Great, lovely. Thank you very much. Okay, thanks very much, Richard and Stuart. Thank you. Okay, we'll now move on to agenda item 13, Hampshire County Council Climate Change Initiatives Progress Report, and we have Felicity Rowe. Felicity, going to present the paper. Thank you.
Hello, Cabinet. Just very briefly to present this paper, we last year set up a one-off fund of 1.2 million to run a range of pilot initiatives around our internal climate change decarbonisation programme. Very early days on that programme, and what we're presenting here is the first year's annual report on progress against that project. Many of the initiatives, given that this was set up in July last year, we've only really had things running for about 6 months in reality. So many of the initiatives are going to be completed in the course of the next next year. But good progress has been made, and we have selected a wide range of projects that you can see in Table 1, which range from a carbon neutral country park, which is the Hamble, which we have basically achieved now, through to the use of hydro-treated vegetable oil pilot within our fleet, which has worked extremely well and has proven that you can just use that instead of diesel, and then various other things, including a significant amount of this money being made available to communities for the upgrade of community facilities with carbon efficient lighting, heating, etc. And that will in turn bring down their revenue costs, and that's been very popular, and we are managing at least 60 or 70 applications now for grants to achieve that over the next years. So I'm very, very pleased with that aspect of the plan. That's all I plan to say on this. Obviously, I'm happy to take questions.
Thanks very much, Felicity, and it's great to see the progress, isn't it, that's been made, and as you say, in a relatively short period of time, and with all the other pressures and everything else that everybody's been going under as well. Members, I'd like to make a comment. Councillor Warwick.
Thank you so much, Felicity. It's really exciting to see the range of projects that came forward. Will you be able to, perhaps in time for the annual carbon reduction report, will probably coming out in October, would this feed into that? Will you be able to sort of give us an idea of the amount of carbon savings that have been generated by these pilot studies, or is that too early days? Are you looking at sort of 2023?
We could probably give an amount.
That would be...
The trouble with the size of the Hampshire estate is this is a tiny contribution to that, but it is a set of pilots that will just help us see where we can progress most easily and where it's going to be very tough indeed.
And we were discussing pilot projects yesterday at the Transport and Environment Committee. We were looking at EV charging pilots as it was, but actually we were saying the importance of pilots is it perhaps enables you to apply for larger grants at a sort of government level. And do you see any of those, have they seeded any further grants?
They haven't yet. The huge challenge we will face as the county council is the decarbonisation internally of our estate. Obviously there's a much wider picture around the whole county of Hampshire. But if we look internally, it's the decarbonisation of our estate, and we have the vast majority of that still in front of us. And as that includes all schools, then the challenge of getting to the intermediate government targets is going to be very big indeed. And this makes a very tiny dent in that.
Okay, thank you. Councillor Chad.
Thank you. Just a comment from me, and I know it's a very small dent that our schools contribute, but just to thank you and your team for all the work that you have done in our schools, and actually just the engagement with our young people as well, with other initiatives through the school meals and the move to more plant-based products as well, has been really noticeable and really significant, so thank you.
Thank you. It's good to hear, particularly on the plant-based menus. Really good.
That's great. Thank you. Councillor Heron.
So I just wanted to say how much I welcome this, and I'm particularly interested looking at Table 2, because you know, when we approved this, we knew that this was a dynamic programme, in the fact that as we learn more about certain things, as other county programmes kick in sort of a larger scale, we look at it, and I think it is really interesting looking at the proof is here in the fact that, you know, as various things are looked at in more detail, some are being dropped, some are being moved to go, well, actually that's something bigger later, and some are being enhanced. So, you know, the allocation for the hydroheated vegetable oil pilot, you know, that's nearly doubled in its allocation, because clearly it's been shown as a positive way forward for further. So I really welcome this, and I welcome the dynamic approach, and I think this comparatively smaller scheme around some of the longer term organisational and community wins is actually really important in helping us understand more as we move forward on what we deliver and where the bigger wins will be and what funding. So I think it's an excellent report. Thank you, Chairman.
Thank you. Councillor Oppenheim.
Well, I was just thinking about the 2050 commissioners, because you mentioned them earlier, Leader, and I think if they were to read this report, they would be satisfied that the Council has responded with appropriate urgency and focus to the priority that they set us 5 years ago. It is really pleasing to see the progress, meaningful decarbonisation, substantial tree planting, which doesn't just capture carbon, it also helps us with our biodiversity. I was very pleased to approve some of that funding for the energy efficiency projects at village halls at my decision day recently. And I'm very proud of the carbon negative country park and the food waste trials at Victoria. But what's also noticeable is that across the council, every department has played their part. I think I've talked at previous cabinet meetings about the great work that's happened in highways in terms of decarbonisation. And I'm very conscious that the school solar project is delivering very meaningful decarbonisation whilst also helping schools with their budgets, by the way. So I think as a county council, we are an exemplar, and long may that continue. And I look forward to continuing to make this a priority.
Thank you very much. Have any further members' comments? I'd just like to say, Felicity, well done. It's interesting that there have been several comments about, in terms of the scale, it's very small. But I think Councillor Warwick and Councillor Harrow made a really important point. Sometimes the pilots, there's a lot of learning that goes on. and maybe that can be adjusted in scale afterwards. And that's a really good way to do that, to understand that. And I go back to the word that Councillor Heron used earlier about flexibility. Being able to flex within that, and it is a sort of a dynamic thing that evolves from that, is a good place for us to be. So accepting that we do learn and we understand more about it, and that helps us in future decision making as well. So thank you very much. I don't have any further comments from anybody else, so I'll take us to the recommendations on page 285. Are we happy to accept those recommendations? Okay, that brings us to the end of this Cabinet and agenda items on today. So it's just to thank everybody for attending and for all the officers for reporting to us and presenting the report. So thank you for that. Just take the thought away that despite in terms of some of the papers that we've looked at as well, I also think times are very challenging for all of us and for a lot of our residents as well. But also when you look at things that how the world is now different and it's challenging, it can also be exciting as well. And I refer back to Councillor Heron's comments about, you know, it can be joyful and happy as well at the same time. So we just need to remember all that as well. Thank you very much. I'll bring the meeting to a close. Thank you. And we can stop recording. Thank you.